The elevator doors opened on the top floor, and Alessio Romano didn't step out. He stayed inside, hand braced against the brushed steel wall, because the second he walked into the hallway, he would have to speak, smile, act normal, while his chest felt tight and hot and wrong. Through the glass at the end of the corridor, he saw her. Grace Carter. She crossed the lobby below with her usual calm, coat over her arm, hair loose from the neat twist she wore during meetings. She moved like she had nowhere to rush to, like the world wasn't always watching. And then a black coupe rolled up to the curb. A man got out. Tall, clean cut, too good-looking to be waiting for anyone who worked for Alessio Romano. He wasn't wearing a suit, but he looked expensive anyway. Dark jacket, fitted jeans, the kind of watchmen bought when they wanted people to notice. The guy walked around the car, opened the passenger door, and said something that made Grace laugh. Grace laughed. Alessio's jaw locked so hard it hurt. The man lifted his hand to the top of the doorframe, shielding her head as she slid into the seat. Polite, familiar, easy, like he'd done it before. Then the door closed, and the car pulled away. Alessio felt it like a hit in his stomach. Not pain, rage, not anger at her, at himself, at the fact that he'd been standing at this window every night lately, pretending it was coincidence that he left at the same time she did. He hadn't planned to watch her. He had planned to invite her into his office at the end of the day, tell her she'd done well on the negotiation, and ask if she was eating dinner, not as her boss, as a man who'd been trying to keep his desire hidden and failing. But now he was standing here with his hands shaking, and she was in another man's car. "Boss?" a voice asked carefully. His head of security, Mason Reed, stood a few feet away, not daring to step closer. Mason knew Alessio's moods better than anyone. He also knew when Alessio didn't want to be seen like this. Alessio didn't turn. How long? Mason hesitated. The car just arrived. She didn't look surprised. That detail snapped something in Alessio's mind. Didn't look surprised. So this wasn't random. This wasn't a rideshare. This was a plan. Alessio's mouth went dry. He forced his voice to stay steady. "Who is he?" "I don't know yet." Alessio finally turned. The elevator doors were still open. He stepped out slowly, like he had all the time in the world, like he wasn't one breath away from doing something stupid. Mason watched him. "Do you want me to?" "Yes." Alessio cut him off. "Follow them." Mason's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Boss?" Alessio's stare stopped him cold. Mason nodded once. "Understood." Alessio walked back into his office as if nothing had happened. The entire floor was designed to make him look untouchable. Dark wood, stone, glass, city lights spreading out like a private view meant only for him. He didn't feel untouchable. He felt like a man watching something slip away and not knowing how to stop it. He sat behind his desk. He opened his laptop. He stared at emails without reading a word. His phone sat on the desk, silent. It had never mattered who left this building with Grace before. Assistants came and went. People had lives. That was normal. But Grace wasn't normal. Grace Carter had arrived a year ago and somehow turned the chaos of Alessio's empire into something smooth. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't impressed by his cars or his penthouse or his name. She spoke to him like he was a person, sometimes too directly, and she didn't flirt, not once, which made him want her more than he wanted to admit. Because he couldn't tell if she stayed near him because she liked him, or because she was smart enough to keep the job that could change her life. He hated that thought. He hated that he cared. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Romano," his receptionist said, voice cautious. "Your driver is here." Alessio looked at his watch. He wasn't supposed to leave for another hour. He stood anyway. "Cancel." A pause. "Yes, sir." He paced once, twice, then stopped himself and sat again. He wouldn't chase Grace around the city like some jealous idiot. He wouldn't. 5 minutes passed. 10. His phone stayed silent. Alessio told himself the silence meant nothing. Then his office door opened without a knock. Mason's habit, because knocking implied Alessio might not be ready. Mason stepped inside. They're heading to Westgate Cinemas. Alessio didn't answer at first. The word settled into his skin like a bad itch. The movies. A date. He kept his voice calm through sheer force. They bought tickets? Yes. Did she look comfortable? Mason's expression was neutral, but his eyes said he understood what that question really meant. She looked relaxed. Relaxed. Alessio almost laughed. He didn't. His chest felt too tight for anything close to humor. Mason added. He put his hand on the small of her back when they walked in. Alessio's vision sharpened, the way it did before a fight. His pulse thudded in his throat. Mason watched him carefully. Boss. Want me to pull them back? I can... No. Alessio's voice came out low. Just watch. Mason nodded, then hesitated again. Alessio. With respect. Alessio's eyes snapped to him. Say it. Mason exhaled. You're acting like she's yours. Alessio stood so fast the chair scraped. She works for me. That's not what this is. Mason held his ground, but he didn't push further. I'll keep a distance. He left. Alessio stood alone in his office, staring at the city like it had answers. He told himself Mason didn't understand. Grace had been in his world long enough to know what men like Alessio did to the people they wanted. They protected. They provided. They controlled. He didn't want to control her. He wanted to keep her safe. And right now he didn't know who that man was, or what he wanted from her. His phone lit up with a message. Mason. They're seated. Row G, center. He bought popcorn. She's smiling. Alessio stared at the words until they blurred. She's smiling. She smiled at Alessio too sometimes, but it was different. Polite, professional, warm, but careful. This smile sounded free. He grabbed his phone, then set it down. Then grabbed it again. He typed, "Where are you tonight?" He deleted it. He typed, "Everything okay?" Deleted. He typed, "Call me." Deleted. His thumb hovered over her name in his contacts. Grace Carter, assistant. He hated that label. He wanted it to say something else. He pressed call. The line rang, once, twice. Then voicemail. Alessio ended the call. He stared at the phone like it had betrayed him. He called again. Voicemail. He called a third time. Voicemail. His jaw tightened. Fine. If she wouldn't answer, he would make sure she knew he was paying attention. He began calling again, not even thinking. His thumb moved like it had its own will. By the 10th call, he was furious. By the 20th, he was something worse. Scared. He imagined her laughing in the dark theater, ignoring the vibrating phone in her bag, ignoring him. He imagined her turning to the man beside her, smiling that relaxed smile, the one that wasn't for Alessio. He imagined her leaving his office for the last time, and he realized suddenly that he couldn't stand it. Not because she was his employee, because she mattered to him, his assistant, his anchor, the only person who walked into his office and told him calmly when he was wrong. His mind flashed back to last week when she'd handed him a folder and said, "You can't bully everyone into agreement, Alessio. People can agree with you and still resent you. That makes enemies." He'd stared at her, annoyed, and she'd raised her brows like she didn't care if he liked her tone. Then she'd added, softer, "I'm saying this because I want you to win without burning everything." He'd wanted to pull her close right then. He hadn't. He'd just said, "You talk too much." And she'd smiled, small, controlled. "And you don't talk enough." Now he was the one talking, calling, pushing. 33 calls later, his phone finally buzzed. Mason. Movie ended early. They're walking out. She just checked her phone. Alessio's breath caught. He could picture it. Grace pulling out her phone, screen glowing, seeing the missed calls. Would she be annoyed? Would she be scared? Would she think he was unstable? The idea made his stomach twist. His phone rang. Grace. Alessio answered instantly. Grace. Her voice came through, low and sharp, like she was holding herself together. Mr. Romano. He hated the formality. Where are you? A pause. Why did you call me 33 times? He almost said, because I needed to hear you. He didn't. He forced his voice steady. I needed to know you were okay. I was at the movies, she said slowly, like she was speaking to a man who needed things explained. I am okay. Who are you with? The question came out before he could stop it. Silence. Then she said, That's not your business. Alessio's pride flared. His control slipped. If you're with someone who shouldn't be, stop. Her voice cut through him. You don't get to talk to me like that. Alessio tightened his grip on the phone. Grace, I'm going to say this once, she continued, still quiet, but every word landed like a slap. You're my boss. You're not my owner. The heat in his chest surged, but it wasn't anger now. It was shame. He didn't like being told no. He especially didn't like it from someone he wanted. And the worst part was, she was right. He lowered his voice. I'm coming to you. No, she said immediately. Do not come here. His jaw flexed. Tell me where you are. She exhaled sharply. We're in the parking lot, Westgate, near the theater entrance, but I'm not doing this with an audience. An audience? Alessio's eyes flicked to the window. He could still see the city lights. The distance meant nothing. His decision was already made. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. Mr. Romano, Alessio. She corrected herself, voice frustrated. Don't. He heard the man's voice in the background, muffled. A question, maybe. Grace said something back, low enough that Alessio couldn't understand. Then she returned to the phone. You're embarrassing yourself. His pride flared again. I'm not afraid to be seen. Well, I am, she shot back, because I work for you, because I have a reputation, and because you're acting. She stopped herself, but he could hear it anyway. Acting crazy. Alessio went still. I'm acting like I care. That's not what this is, she said, voice shaking slightly now. This is control, and I don't do control. Alessio swallowed. Grace, please, she said, and that word was worse than anger. It was the sound of disappointment. Don't make me regret trusting you. The line went dead. Alessio stood there, phone pressed to his ear, hearing nothing but his own breathing. He could have stayed. He could have let it go, acted like it never happened, apologized tomorrow, sent flowers, done something easy. But Alessio Romano wasn't good at easy. He was good at decisive. He picked up his jacket. He moved fast, out of the office, into the private elevator. His driver was already waiting in the underground garage, eyes widening when he saw Alessio's face. Westgate Cinemas, Alessio said, sliding into the back seat. Now. The car surged forward. Alessio stared out the window, watching the city rush past, and tried to calm his thoughts. He told himself he would handle this cleanly. He would walk up, speak quietly, apologize for the calls, and leave with his dignity. That was the plan. Then Mason's message came in again. He just put his hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. Alessio's vision narrowed. The plan broke. The car pulled into the cinema lot. Alessio was out before the driver could fully stop. He walked fast, purposeful, every step sharp. He saw them immediately. Grace stood near a row of parked cars under a bright light, her coat now on, her hair tucked behind one ear, phone in her hand. Her posture was straight, controlled, but her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright like she'd been fighting to stay calm. And beside her stood the man, even more attractive up close. That kind of easy beauty that made people look twice. The man leaned slightly toward Grace, speaking with a soft expression, like he was trying to reassure her, and then he touched her shoulder. Alessio's pulse slammed. He walked straight to them. Grace saw him first. Her eyes widened. Alessio. Alessio didn't slow down. He stopped a few feet away, his presence immediately changing the air around them. People nearby glanced over. The man turned, surprised, then polite. Can I help you? Alessio looked him up and down, taking in the calm confidence. Who are you? Grace's face tightened. Stop. Alessio ignored her. You picked her up from my building. You took her out. You've been touching her like you have a right. Grace's eyes flashed. Oh my God. The man blinked, then looked at Grace like he was checking if this was real. Is he serious? Grace squeezed her eyes shut for a second, then opened them, jaw set. Alessio, not here. Alessio's voice rose without him meaning it to. You didn't answer my calls. A couple walking past slowed down, watching. Someone pretended to check their phone while listening. Grace's face turned red. Because I was in a movie. I called because Alessio stopped. Because saying I was losing my mind would only make this worse. Because you disappeared. I didn't disappear, she snapped. I left work at a normal time. Alessio stepped closer. With him. The man lifted both hands, palms out, like he was trying to calm a dog. Hey man, I don't know what's going on, but... Alessio turned his head slowly. Don't talk. The man's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Grace stepped between them instantly, pushing her palm lightly against Alessio's chest to stop him from moving closer. That touch should have soothed him. It didn't. It made him ache. Do you hear yourself? Grace hissed. You're humiliating me. Alessio swallowed. Tell me who he is. Grace stared at him like she couldn't believe he'd made her do this here, under these lights, with strangers watching. Then she turned to the man and spoke quickly. Ethan, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Ethan, so the pretty stranger had a name. Ethan looked at Grace, then at Alessio, eyes narrowing. Grace, do you want me to call someone? No, she said firmly. Just wait. Ethan stepped back, but he didn't leave. He stayed close enough to show he was not intimidated. Alessio hated that. Grace faced Alessio again, her voice lowered, dangerously calm. You want to know who he is? Fine. Look at him. Alessio's eyes flicked to Ethan. Grace continued, every word tight. That's my nephew. Alessio froze. His brain didn't accept it at first. Your... His voice came out rough. Your nephew? Yes. Grace didn't blink. My nephew. Ethan's mouth fell open. Wait, nephew is the word. Grace shot him a look. Yes, Ethan, nephew is the word. Ethan looked between them, then let out a short laugh of disbelief. This is insane. Alessio's chest tightened, but now it wasn't rage. It was shock, confusion, a slow hot wave of embarrassment rising up his neck. Grace kept going because she wasn't going to let him escape this with a soft landing. He's my brother's son, she said. My brother is older than me by 15 years. Ethan is my age. He grew up around me. We're close. Alessio felt like the ground had shifted under his feet. Ethan crossed his arms, studying Alessio openly now. So you're her boss? Alessio didn't answer. Ethan looked at Grace. You work for a guy who calls you 33 times because you went to a movie with your own family? Grace's eyes closed again for a second. Ethan, please. Ethan looked back at Alessio, voice sharp but controlled. You owe her an apology. Alessio's pride tried to rise, but it couldn't. Not with Grace's hand still against his chest, not with her eyes shining, not with the weight of what he'd just done in front of strangers. Grace lowered her hand, not gentle, not cruel, just done. I'm leaving, she said to Alessio. I'm going home, alone. Do not follow me. Alessio's throat tightened. Grace, she cut him off. Tomorrow, at work. If you want to talk, you can talk like a normal person. Not like this. She turned toward Ethan. Let's go. Ethan nodded, still glaring at Alessio, then opened the car door for her with the same easy politeness that had started this whole disaster. Grace got in without looking back. Alessio stood there under the bright parking lot light, aware of the people who had been watching, aware of the silence between him and the man who had just put him in his place. Ethan paused before getting into the driver's seat. He leaned slightly toward Alessio and said, low enough that only Alessio could hear, If you actually care about her, you'll learn the difference between love and control. Then he shut the door, got in, and drove away. Alessio didn't move until the taillights disappeared. His phone buzzed in his hand again. Mason asking if he should intervene, if Alessio wanted him to handle it. Alessio stared at the message, jaw tight, stomach twisting. He had handled it, and he had made a fool of himself. He slipped the phone into his pocket and turned back toward his car, face hard, mind louder than the traffic. Because tomorrow, Grace Carter would walk into his office with that calm expression and those sharp boundaries, and Alessio Romano had no idea how to face her without losing the one thing he always relied on: control. Alessio Romano didn't sleep. He lay on his back in the dark, one arm thrown over his eyes, replaying the parking lot light, the faces turning, Grace's voice, steady but wounded, and Ethan's last sentence that had landed like a clean punch. If you actually care about her, you'll learn the difference between love and control. Alessio had built his life on control. He controlled rooms, markets, men. He controlled his own expression so well most people forgot he was human. Last night, he'd lost it in front of strangers. And worst of all, he'd lost it in front of her. When morning came, the city looked too bright, too ordinary for the kind of embarrassment still clinging to his skin. He showered longer than usual, scrubbing away the night like it had left a mark. He dressed in black as always. Tailored slacks, crisp shirt, no tie. The mirror showed the same man the world feared. It didn't show the panic he'd felt when Grace didn't answer. It didn't show the sharp twist in his stomach now, imagining her walking into his building with that calm, careful face, and looking at him like she regretted trusting him. His phone buzzed on the edge of the sink. Mason. She's on her way. Alessio stared at the message. His fingers hovered, then typed back. No security near her today, not even in the lobby. A moment later. Understood. Alessio exhaled slowly. It was a small thing, but it was something. If he meant what he wanted to say, he had to start by proving it. He arrived earlier than anyone. He didn't want witnesses. He didn't want an audience. He didn't deserve one. His office on the top floor felt colder than usual, the glass walls turning the morning sun into a glare. Alessio set his phone face down. He opened the folder Grace had left on his desk yesterday. Contracts, notes, her clean handwriting in the margins. He read a sentence she'd underlined. If you push too hard, they'll agree, and hate you later. He almost smiled. It was exactly what she would say. Exactly the kind of truth no one else dared to deliver. And he had repaid her honesty with 33 missed calls. The elevator chimed softly. Alessio's spine straightened before he could stop it. Footsteps. Then the door to his office opened. Grace Carter walked in like nothing had happened. That was the first thing that hit him. Her control. Not his. Hers. She wore a cream blouse under a fitted charcoal blazer, hair pinned back neatly, small gold earrings catching the light when she turned her head. Her face was composed, eyes clear, lips neutral. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. But there was a distance in her posture, in the way she stopped just inside the doorway, like the air between them had rules now. Good morning, Mr. Romano, she said, professional and polite. Mr. Romano, not Alessio. Not even that reluctant Alessio she'd tried last night before frustration took over. Alessio stood. Grace. She walked to his desk and placed a tablet down with her schedule for the day. Your 9 o'clock moved to 9:30. The Westbridge group requested more time. Alessio watched her mouth form words while his mind screamed to say something else. I arranged lunch, she continued, eyes down. It's at your usual place, private room. He could hear it, how carefully she was boxing him in, keeping him as a boss. Nothing more. Alessio's throat tightened. Grace. She looked up just briefly. Yes? Her eyes were calm, but not warm, like she'd turned off a light inside herself. Alessio walked around the desk slowly, giving her space. He didn't want to crowd her. He didn't want to be the man from last night again. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Her expression didn't change. Yes. The flatness of that yes cut deeper than anger would have. Alessio nodded once, accepting it. Last night Grace lifted a hand, stopping him. Not aggressive, just firm. Not here. she said in the same calm tone she used with attorneys and bankers who tried to interrupt her. You have 2 meetings in the next hour. We don't have time. Alessio's jaw flexed. He hated being managed. He hated being told no. But he forced himself to breathe. Then when? Grace hesitated a fraction, just long enough for him to see she hadn't decided if she wanted to give him a chance. After your last meeting, she said. If there's time. If there's time, he echoed. She nodded, already moving toward the door. Your coffee is on the side table. Alessio watched her leave, and the silence that followed felt too big. Mason appeared in the doorway a moment later, like he'd been waiting for the signal. Boss? Alessio didn't look at him. Don't. Mason's mouth twitched like he was trying not to smile. I wasn't going to say anything. Alessio finally turned, eyes sharp. Your face says enough. Mason lifted his hands in surrender. You told me you didn't care what people thought. I don't. Alessio snapped automatically. Mason's eyebrows rose. Then why do you look like you want to jump out the window? Alessio glared. Mason stepped in a little, lowering his voice. She's doing her job. She's keeping it clean. Alessio ran a hand over his jaw. I embarrassed her. Yes, Mason said simply. Alessio's stare hardened. Anything else? Mason sighed. I pulled the car information. The handsome guy is Ethan Carter. Same last name as her. Clean record. No threats. He's kind of annoying, actually. Smiles too much. Alessio didn't know whether that made him feel better or worse. Mason added almost reluctantly. He did call her this morning. Alessio's eyes narrowed. Why? Mason checked his phone. He wanted to make sure she got to work okay, and Mason hesitated, clearly enjoying this part. He asked if the dramatic suit man calmed down. Alessio's face went deadly. Get out. Mason backed up, grinning. Yes, boss. When the door closed, Alessio leaned both hands on his desk and stared at nothing. Dramatic suit man. He didn't even wear a suit. He wanted to be angry. It was easier than admitting the truth. Ethan had every right to mock him. The day dragged. Alessio's meetings were smooth on the surface. People nodded. People agreed. People watched him carefully, as they always did. He spoke in a steady voice, signed papers, made decisions. But every few minutes his eyes flicked to the glass wall that looked out into the assistant area. Grace sat at her desk like she belonged there. Focused, efficient, answering calls, typing, sliding documents into neat stacks. She didn't look up at him once. At noon, she walked into his office with a folder. Lunch is ready, she said. Your driver is waiting downstairs. Alessio took the folder but didn't open it. Grace, sit. She didn't move. I need to coordinate your afternoon call. Grace. His voice softened on her name. Please. Something in her expression tightened. She hesitated, then sat on the far edge of the chair across from his desk, posture straight, hands folded in her lap. She looked ready to stand at any second. Alessio hated that he'd made her feel that way. He didn't go behind the desk. He stayed in front of it, leaning against the edge so he didn't feel like he was towering over her. I'm not going to justify what I did, he said. Grace blinked once as if she hadn't expected that. Alessio continued, each word deliberate. I called you too many times. I had you followed. I confronted you in public. Grace's face stayed calm, but her fingers tightened slightly together. Yes, it was wrong, he said. It was humiliating. For you. And for you, she added quietly. Alessio nodded. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Grace held his gaze for a moment, and there it was, the woman behind the professionalism. Not cold. Not cruel. Just guarded. What did you think was happening? She asked, voice low. Alessio's throat tightened again. He could lie. He could pretend it was about safety. He could use power as a shield. He didn't. I thought you were with a man who mattered to you, he admitted. And he paused, jaw tight. I didn't handle it. Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. That's an interesting way to say, you panicked. Alessio's lips pressed together. Yes. Grace let out a soft exhale, almost a laugh without humor. You panicked because your assistant went to the movies. Alessio didn't argue. Yes. Grace tilted her head, studying him like she was deciding what kind of man he really was under the polished surface. Then she said very calmly, "Do you understand what scares me about that, Alessio?" The use of his name hit him like a spark, but her tone wasn't warm. It was serious. Alessio held still. "Tell me." "It wasn't the calls," she said. "Not only. It was the entitlement behind them. The assumption that you had the right to demand answers from me, on my personal time, because your feelings were uncomfortable." Alessio swallowed. He could feel the sting in every word because she wasn't exaggerating. She was naming the exact thing he didn't want to face. Grace continued, gaze steady. "I work hard. I respect you. I've protected your business more times than you realize. But you don't get to punish me for having a life." Alessio's voice came out low. "I wasn't trying to punish you." Grace's eyes flashed. Intent doesn't erase impact. That was another thing she always did, cut straight to truth. Alessio nodded slowly. "You're right." Grace looked down for a moment, as if collecting herself. When she looked up again, her voice was quieter. "I grew up with men who thought control was love," she said. "I promised myself I'd never confuse the two again." Alessio's chest tightened. "Someone hurt you?" Grace's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Don't! I'm not asking for details," he said quickly. "I'm telling you I hear you." Grace held his gaze, searching for something. Then she nodded once, small and cautious. Alessio leaned forward slightly, careful not to close the distance too fast. "What can I do to fix this?" Grace's mouth parted like she hadn't expected him to ask that. Then she said, "Start by respecting my boundaries. If you want to speak to me as Alessio, then speak to me like a man who trusts me." Alessio's throat tightened. "And if I want more than that?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. Grace went still. For one suspended second, the air in the office changed. The professional wall trembled. Grace's eyes flicked to his mouth, then back to his eyes. Her cheeks colored faintly. Alessio felt it too. Heat, desire, the pull that had been there for months, but had never been allowed to breathe. Grace's voice came out softer, edged with warning. "Then you need to be careful." Alessio's pulse surged. "I am careful." She let out a quiet, almost disbelieving sound. "Last night wasn't careful." Alessio didn't flinch. "Last night was a mistake." Grace held his gaze for a long moment. Then she stood, smoothing her blazer like she could smooth the tension away with fabric. "We're not having this conversation now," she said. "You have lunch." "I'm not hungry," Alessio said. Grace's eyes narrowed. "Yes, you are. You just don't want to leave the room because you're afraid I'll walk away." The accuracy of it hit him, and despite himself, a short laugh escaped him. Quiet, surprised, almost genuine. Grace blinked, like she'd forgotten he could laugh. Alessio's smile faded quickly, replaced by seriousness. "Don't walk away." Grace's expression softened just a fraction, not into forgiveness, but into something human. "Then don't give me a reason." She turned toward the door. Alessio watched her go, and the instinct to chase rose up hard. Then he forced it down. He stayed where he was. He let her leave, because that was what she'd asked for. Respect. When he entered the private lunchroom downstairs, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He stared at it, then answered. Romano. A bright voice came through, too cheerful. "Hi, dramatic suit man." Alessio closed his eyes. "Ethan." Ethan laughed like they were friends. "So you do know my name. Why are you calling me?" Alessio's voice was flat. "Because my aunt is trying to be professional and not say what she actually wants to say," Ethan replied. "So I'm saying it." Alessio's jaw tightened. "You have 10 seconds. "Okay," Ethan said, still amused. 1, you embarrassed her. 2, she won't admit it, but she likes you. 3, if you scare her again, I'll make it my personal mission to ruin your day forever." Alessio stared at the tablecloth, fighting the urge to throw the phone. "Are you threatening me?" Ethan gasped theatrically. No, that would be rude. I'm warning you with love. Alessio's lips twitched despite himself. You're insufferable. Correct, Ethan said proudly. But I'm also right. Listen, Grace is loyal. She's tough. She doesn't ask for much. Don't make her regret choosing your world. Alessio's throat tightened. She didn't choose my world. She did, Ethan said simply. Every day she walks into that building, she's choosing it. So maybe you can choose her too. The line went quiet for a beat. Then Ethan added lighter. Also, for the record, I'm not her boyfriend. I'm her nephew. Please stop staring at me like I'm going to steal your lunch. Alessio exhaled slowly. I don't stare. Ethan laughed again. Sure, bye, Alessio. He hung up. Alessio stared at his phone for a long moment, then set it down. His appetite was gone, but he forced himself to eat a few bites anyway, remembering Grace's words. You are hungry. You just don't want to leave because you're afraid I'll walk away. He returned upstairs mid-afternoon to find Grace at her desk, still working, still composed. As he walked past, she didn't look up. But when he stepped into his office, there was a faint scent of her perfume on the air, clean, warm, subtle, and it made his chest ache. Hours later, the last meeting ended. The sun was low, turning the city gold. Alessio stood at the window for a moment, then turned and walked out. Grace was still there. She looked up as he approached, eyes cautious. You're done? Yes, he said. Do we have time? Grace's gaze flicked to the clock, then back to him. A few minutes. Alessio nodded. Come in. Grace stood and followed him into his office. She remained near the door this time, not sitting, posture guarded. Alessio didn't blame her. He moved slowly, keeping distance. I want to say this clearly, he began. I was wrong. I crossed lines I should never cross with you. Grace's face stayed calm, but her eyes were sharp. Listening, measuring. Alessio continued, voice low. I can't undo it, but I can promise it won't happen again. Grace studied him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Promises are easy. Alessio nodded. Then I'll prove it. Grace's lips parted slightly, and for a second the tension softened into something else, something warm and dangerous. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a single envelope. She walked to his desk and placed it down, careful, deliberate, like she was setting down something fragile. Alessio stared at it. His stomach tightened. What is that? He asked, though he already knew. Grace's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened faintly. It's my notice. Alessio's blood went cold. Grace. His voice came out rough. No. Grace lifted her chin, calm and firm. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it because I meant what I said. I don't do control. Alessio's hands flexed at his sides, fighting every instinct to grab the envelope, to tear it, to demand she stay. Instead, he forced himself to stand still. Is this final? He asked, voice low. Grace held his gaze. I don't know, she said softly. That depends on what you do next. Alessio Romano stared at the envelope long after Grace left his office. It stayed there on his desk, untouched, white against dark wood, heavier than any contract he had ever signed. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. A notice was a notice, an exit, a line drawn. For the first time in years, power didn't help him. He didn't call her. That alone took more control than the night before had taken away. The office grew quiet as the day drained out of it. One by one, people left. Lights dimmed automatically. The city outside shifted into evening, glass towers glowing like distant fires. Mason appeared at the door, as he always did when things felt off. She resigned? Mason asked, eyes flicking to the envelope. She might, Alessio said. Mason leaned against the doorframe. That's new. Alessio finally looked at him. Say what you're thinking. Mason didn't smile this time. You're afraid. Alessio didn't deny it. I don't like it. No one does, Mason replied. But fear usually means something matters. Alessio exhaled slowly. I don't want her staying because she feels trapped. Mason nodded once. Then don't trap her. Alessio's gaze dropped back to the envelope. If she leaves, I won't stop her. Mason's eyebrows lifted. You sure? Alessio's jaw tightened. If I stop her, I become exactly what she's afraid of. Mason studied him for a long moment, then gave a quiet nod. That's the right answer. He paused, then added almost casually, for what it's worth? She didn't look relieved when she handed that in. Alessio's head snapped up. She didn't. No, Mason said. She looked disappointed. Those aren't the same thing. When Mason left, Alessio remained standing, staring at the city until the sun fully disappeared. He didn't work late. That too was new. Grace Carter didn't go home right away. She drove with the radio off, hands steady on the wheel, replaying the day in her mind. Alessio's apology, his restraint, the way he hadn't followed her, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't tried to negotiate her notice into something else. Part of her had expected him to tear the envelope in half, the fact that he hadn't scared her more than if he had. She pulled into a quiet coffee shop parking lot and sat there for a long moment, engine idling. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. She answered without looking at the screen. If you're about to tell me I'm dramatic, hang up. I'm about to tell you I'm proud of you, Ethan said. Grace closed her eyes. I hate that you're always right. Ethan laughed softly. You don't hate it. You just don't like needing backup. Grace stared out at the darkened storefront. I didn't want it to come to this. Of course you didn't, Ethan said. You like him. Grace didn't answer. Ethan didn't push. Question, he said instead. Did he try to stop you? No. That's interesting, Ethan said. The guy who nearly combusted in a parking lot suddenly developed self-control? Grace's mouth curved despite herself. He's trying. That's dangerous, Ethan teased. You might start believing him. Grace sighed. That's the problem. She hung up and finally went home. Sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, Alessio arrived early again. The envelope was still there, untouched. He picked it up, weighed it in his hand, then placed it in his desk drawer. He didn't shred it. He didn't sign anything. He waited. Grace arrived precisely on time. She greeted him with the same calm professionalism as the day before, but something in her eyes shifted when she noticed the envelope was gone from the desk. She said nothing. They worked. And that was somehow worse than fighting. Emails, calls, meetings, efficient, polite, controlled. At noon, Alessio stood near her desk. Lunch? Grace didn't look up. You have a working lunch with the finance team. I canceled it. She finally lifted her gaze. Why? Because I don't want to pretend nothing happened, he said quietly. A pause. Grace straightened her papers. That sounds like something we shouldn't do in the office. Alessio nodded. Then don't come as my assistant. Her breath caught, just barely. And come as what? He met her eyes. Grace. The silence stretched. Then she stood. 1 hour. The restaurant was small, quiet, no private room, no spectacle. They sat across from each other like equals, not boss and employee, not enemies, not lovers, something uncertain in between. Grace folded her hands. You didn't open the envelope. No, Alessio said. Why? Because if you leave, I want it to be because you chose to, not because I panicked. Grace studied him. And if I choose to stay? Alessio didn't answer immediately. He leaned back slightly, forcing himself to relax. Then I want it to be because you want me, not my world. Grace's lips parted at that. She looked down at the table, then back up. You're saying all the right things. I know, he said. That doesn't mean I deserve trust yet. Grace's expression softened despite herself. No, it doesn't. They ate slowly, talked about small things, normal things, movies, books, a new bakery she liked, a jazz bar he used to go to years ago. For the first time since the parking lot, they laughed. It felt dangerous. Good. After lunch, Alessio didn't reach for her hand, didn't touch her at all. He walked her to her car and stopped a respectful distance away. "Thank you for giving me an hour," he said. Grace nodded. "Thank you for not ruining it." She opened the car door, then paused. "I'm still leaving, unless something changes." "I know," Alessio said. She looked at him, searching. "This isn't a game, Alessio. I don't play games with things I want to keep." That made her swallow. She drove away. That night, Alessio went somewhere he hadn't been in years. A quiet church, empty except for candlelight and silence. He sat in the back, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. He wasn't praying. He didn't know how. He was thinking about the kind of man he'd become by surviving, about how control had once been safety, about how easily love could turn into fear if he wasn't careful, and about Grace Carter, who had walked into his life and refused to be small. When he left, his phone buzzed. "Grace, just one message. I'm not ready to forgive you, but I see you trying." Alessio read it twice, then once more. He typed a reply slowly. "That's enough for now." He didn't add anything else. Across the city, Grace set her phone down and leaned back against her couch, heart racing a little faster than she wanted to admit. Because trying was new for him, and wanting him was becoming dangerous for her. Neither of them knew yet which would win. Grace Carter woke before her alarm. The city outside her window was still quiet, wrapped in that thin gray light that came before the day decided what it was going to be. She lay on her back for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the echo of the message she'd sent the night before. "I see you trying." She hadn't planned to send it. It had slipped out of her fingers while her guard was down, when the apartment felt too quiet and her thoughts too loud. Trying didn't erase what had happened, but it mattered. She pushed herself out of bed, showered, dressed carefully. Not for him. She told herself that twice. She chose a navy dress she wore when she needed to feel grounded, paired with low heels she could walk fast in if she had to. Her reflection looked composed, professional, steady. She needed to stay that way. Alessio Romano was already awake when dawn reached his windows. He stood barefoot in his kitchen, espresso untouched in his hand, phone on the counter. He hadn't replied to Grace's message with anything more than acknowledgement because anything else would have crossed into pressure, and he refused to do that again. The night at the church still sat heavy in his chest. He hadn't prayed, but he'd faced something worse than fear. Himself, stripped of excuses. He dressed more simply than usual that morning. No jacket, no watch, just clean lines and restraint. Mason noticed immediately when Alessio stepped into the garage. "You look less terrifying," Mason said. Alessio didn't smile. "Good." Mason studied him. "She coming in today?" "Yes." "And you're not planning anything dramatic?" Alessio shot him a look. "If you ask that again, I'll fire you." Mason grinned. "Worth it." Grace arrived at the office on time. As soon as she stepped onto the floor, she felt the difference. No hovering security, no subtle tension. The space felt normal. Alessio was already in his office, door open. He didn't call her in. That mattered. She went to her desk, set down her bag, opened her calendar, and started working. Emails, calls, a contract that needed revision. The rhythm of competence settled her nerves better than anything else could. An hour passed, then 2. At mid-morning, Alessio stepped out of his office holding a folder. He stopped a few feet from her desk, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd. "When you have a moment," he said evenly, "I'd like your input on this. Not now, not come here, not I need you." Grace looked up, surprised despite herself. "All right." She finished what she was doing, then stood and followed him into his office. The door stayed open. That mattered too. Alessio handed her the folder and leaned back against the desk, arms loosely crossed, not looming. "I don't agree with their timeline," he said, "but I want to hear what you think." Grace scanned the pages, pen tapping lightly against her finger as she read. He watched her, not the way he had before, not with hunger or ownership, but with attention. When she finished, she looked up. They're trying to rush you because they think speed will make you careless. If you slow it down, they'll give more. Alessio nodded. That was my instinct. She raised an eyebrow. Then why ask me? Because instincts can be wrong, he said. And because you're usually right. The words landed quietly but solidly between them. Grace closed the folder. Then slow it down, calmly. No pressure. Alessio smiled faintly. You're good at this. She met his gaze for a brief second longer than necessary. I know. She left before the moment could stretch into something else. By lunchtime, the tension between them had shifted. It wasn't gone. It had softened, like something sharp wrapped in cloth. They moved around each other carefully, aware but not defensive. Grace ate at her desk. Alessio did the same. When she finished, she stood to refill her water bottle and nearly collided with him in the hallway outside his office. They stopped at the same time. Sorry, she said automatically. So am I, he replied. They both froze, then let out small, awkward breaths. Grace gestured with the bottle. I won't keep you, he said quickly. She paused, studying his face. He looked tired, but not in the usual way. Less armored. Alessio, she said quietly. I meant what I said yesterday. I know, he replied, and I'm not asking you to change your mind. That surprised her. You're not? No. His voice was steady. I'm asking you to watch what I do next. Grace nodded slowly. All right. She walked away, heart beating a little faster. The real test came that afternoon. A vendor called, angry, demanding, loud enough that Grace could hear it through the glass wall. Alessio's voice remained calm, controlled. He didn't threaten. He didn't dominate. He negotiated. When the call ended, Grace looked up, genuinely impressed. Alessio caught her expression and lifted an eyebrow. What? You didn't bulldoze him, she said. I wanted to, he admitted. She smiled despite herself. Progress. Something warm flickered across his face at the word. Later, as the office began to empty, Grace organized files for the next day. Alessio stepped out of his office again, jacket now in hand. I'm leaving, he said. You don't have to stay. I know, she replied. I'll be done in 10 minutes. He nodded and hesitated. Grace? She looked up. I meant what I said, he added, about wanting you, not your job, not your loyalty. You. Her chest tightened. I know. He didn't push further. He left. Grace finished her work and shut down her computer. As she stepped into the elevator, she realized her hands were trembling slightly. She pressed them together, grounding herself. That evening, Ethan called. So, he said, did the dramatic suit man behave today? Grace smiled faintly. Yes. Ethan hummed. That's dangerous. Stop saying that. I won't, he replied, because you're smiling. Grace leaned against her kitchen counter. He's different. For how long? I don't know. Ethan softened. Just promise me something. What? If he slips, you won't excuse it. Grace's smile faded. I won't. They hung up, and Grace stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. Across the city, Alessio sat alone in his living room, lights low, jacket draped over a chair. He replayed the day, not the mistakes, but the restraint, the moments where he'd chosen silence instead of force. It felt unfamiliar, uncomfortable, but it also felt right. His phone buzzed. Grace. One message. Today mattered. Alessio closed his eyes briefly, then he typed back. Tomorrow will too. He set the phone down and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Because trying was becoming something else now. It was becoming a choice. And choices, he knew, were harder to control than fear, but far more powerful. He just hoped he'd chosen soon enough. Grace Carter didn't expect the next morning to feel easy. Not fully. Not carefree. But lighter than it had any right to be after everything. She walked into the office with her shoulders squared, coffee in hand. mind already organizing the day. Her notice still existed. Her boundaries still mattered. Her heart still had no business getting involved. And yet, when she stepped off the elevator and saw Alessio Romano through the glass wall of his office, she didn't feel that familiar tightening in her stomach. His door was open again. He was on a call, voice low, calm, controlled. No sharp edges, no heat, just steady authority. When he ended the call, he glanced up and met her eyes through the glass. He gave her a small nod. No demand, no wave, no "come here," just acknowledgement. Grace sat at her desk and began her morning routine, but she noticed things she hadn't before because now she was watching for patterns. Not words, behavior. No security near her desk, no check-ins, no hovering. The first real test came without warning. A courier delivered a thick envelope to Grace's desk, marked with the logo of a competing firm in Manhattan. She frowned as she signed for it, then slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside was a formal offer letter. A senior executive assistant role, better salary, benefits, relocation assistance, a clean exit from the world she'd stepped into. Grace stared at the page longer than she should have. Her stomach tightened, not with excitement, but with a strange sadness that annoyed her. She should have felt relief. She should have felt proud. She'd earned this. Instead, the first thought that hit her was simple and inconvenient. If I leave, I won't see him every day. She shut the folder quickly, as if that thought had been caught on paper. Then she placed it in her bag and focused on work. At 9:30, Alessio stepped out of his office and approached her desk. He stopped at the same respectful distance he'd kept all week. He didn't look down at her like a boss checking his employee. He looked at her like a man who was trying to earn the right to speak. "Grace," he said quietly, "do you have a minute?" She searched his face. "For work?" "For you," he replied. The words were soft, but they held weight. Grace's heart beat a little faster. She kept her voice even. 5 minutes. Alessio nodded once like he'd been given something valuable. "In my office. Door stays open." That detail made her chest loosen slightly. "Okay." She stood and followed him in. He didn't sit behind the desk. He moved to the side, near the window, leaving her space. She chose the chair across from his desk anyway, because she wanted the distance, because it reminded both of them what was still true. Alessio folded his hands loosely. "I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries." Grace's expression stayed neutral. "Good." He didn't flinch. "I want to ask you something, and you can say no." Grace's pulse jumped. "All right." He held her gaze, steady and careful. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" The question was simple. The effect wasn't. Grace felt heat spread up her neck, and she hated that he could probably see it. She lifted her chin slightly, refusing to look away. "As my boss?" she asked. His mouth tightened, like that label hurt him now. "No." "As Alessio?" she pressed. He nodded. "As a man who wants you." Grace's fingers tightened lightly on the arm of the chair. The directness should have made her retreat. Instead, it made her breathe out slowly. "You know this is complicated," she said. "Yes," he replied. "That's why I'm asking, not assuming." Grace studied him. He looked controlled, but his eyes weren't cold. They were serious, almost nervous, in a way that didn't match his reputation. "Where?" she asked, careful. "A small place," he said. "Not fancy, not private, not a statement. Just dinner." Grace narrowed her eyes slightly. "You're not trying to impress me with money." His lips twitched once. "I assumed you'd hate that." "I would," she said. "I know," he replied, calm. "So I'm not doing it." Grace sat back, silently weighing the feeling in her chest. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely. But she also couldn't deny the truth. He was trying, and he wasn't pressuring her. She nodded once. "Dinner, 1 hour." Alessio's expression softened, just a fraction. 2. Grace almost smiled. 1.5. He nodded like he'd just won something. "Deal." Then he added, voice quiet, And if at any moment you want to leave, you leave. No questions, no calls, no following. Grace held his gaze. You can do that? Alessio's jaw flexed, but his voice stayed steady. Yes. She didn't fully believe it yet, but she wanted to. All right, she said. Text me the address. Alessio's brow lifted slightly. You want me to have your number? Grace's lips pressed together. You already have it. You abused it. His expression tightened with shame. You're right. Grace stood. I'll see you tonight, Alessio. And for the first time in days when she said his name, it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a door opening, just a little. By late afternoon, Grace was tense again. Not because she was afraid of him, because she was aware of him. Every time she walked past his office, she felt his attention shift toward her. Not possessive, not demanding, just present. Like he was aware of her in a way he couldn't turn off, and she was aware right back. It annoyed her. It thrilled her. It made her feel too much. Ethan called around 5. Grace answered while she packed her bag. Hi. Ethan's voice came through bright and immediate. Okay, tell me everything. There is nothing to tell, Grace said, but she couldn't stop the small smile in her tone. Ethan laughed. There it is, that smile. So, dinner? Grace froze. How do you know? Because he texted me, Ethan said proudly. He asked where to take you. Grace stopped walking. He did what? Ethan lowered his voice like he was sharing gossip. He said, and I quote, she hates flashy places. Where can I take her that won't feel like a trap? Grace swallowed, heart tightening in a way that felt almost tender. Ethan continued, I told him the jazz bar on 7th, the one with good food and no velvet ropes. Grace stared at her desk. You're involved now. I'm always involved, Ethan said cheerfully. I'm family. Also, I'm entertaining. Grace sighed. Ethan. Listen, he said, suddenly softer. If he's asking for advice instead of taking control, that's good. But I need you to stay sharp. I am sharp, Grace replied. No, Ethan said gently. You're brave. Sharp is when you don't excuse red flags because the guy is hot. Grace rolled her eyes, but her voice softened. Thank you. Ethan brightened again. Also, wear the dress that makes you look like you could ruin a man's life with one sentence. Grace snorted. Goodbye. Have fun, Ethan called. And if he tries to hold your hand too soon, smack him. Grace hung up, shaking her head, still smiling. Then she remembered the envelope in her bag, the job offer. Her smile faded. Because tonight wasn't just dinner. Tonight was a choice. At 7:30, Grace arrived at the jazz bar Ethan had recommended. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't filled with people trying to be seen. The lights were warm and low. The music was live, smooth, steady, intimate, without being dramatic. She stepped inside and immediately felt her nerves spike. Not because she felt unsafe, because she felt desired. Alessio stood near the back, waiting. No entourage, no guards, no suit. He wore a dark button-down with sleeves rolled to his forearms, no tie, the top button open. He looked less like a myth and more like a man. Still dangerous, still intense, but human. When he saw her, his face changed. He didn't let it turn into something hungry. He kept it controlled. But she saw it anyway, the way his eyes moved over her and paused, like he had to remind himself to breathe. Grace wore a simple black dress, fitted but not loud, with a coat draped over her arm. Her hair was down, soft around her shoulders. Alessio stepped toward her slowly. You came. Grace lifted her chin. I said I would. He nodded once, like he respected that more than anything. Thank you. Grace's chest tightened again at the way he said it, like gratitude, not entitlement. They were led to a small table near the stage, not hidden, not exposed, just normal. Alessio pulled out her chair. Grace watched him. You're being very polite. He sat across from her. I'm being careful. Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. Because you want something. Alessio didn't pretend. Yes. Grace's pulse jumped. And you think dinner is going to change my mind? Alessio's gaze held hers. No. I think dinner is going to show you who I am when I'm not trying to control anything. Grace's throat tightened. She looked away briefly, focusing on the menu so she didn't reveal too much. They ordered. Nothing excessive, nothing showy. When the waiter walked away, silence settled between them. Not awkward, charged. Alessio broke it first. How was your day? Grace looked up. Productive. He waited, as if giving her room to choose what else to say. Grace exhaled softly. I got an offer. Alessio went still. His face didn't harden. He didn't react like a man about to fight. But she saw the shift in his eyes, pain, quickly hidden. What kind of offer? He asked, voice controlled. Grace hesitated. Another job. He nodded slowly. Better? Yes, she admitted. Alessio's jaw tightened. He didn't ask where. He didn't demand details. Instead, he said quietly, Congratulations. Grace blinked, caught off guard. That's it? He met her eyes. That's what you deserve. Her chest tightened. You're not going to try to stop me. Alessio's voice lowered. If you want to go, you go. Grace stared at him. Why? His expression was serious. Because if you stay because I held you here, then I lose you anyway. Just slower. Grace swallowed. The waiter returned with drinks, breaking the moment. Grace took a sip of water, grateful for something to do with her hands. Alessio watched her carefully. Are you leaning toward leaving? Grace didn't answer immediately. She looked at him, really looked. I don't know, she admitted. I'm leaning toward feeling something I didn't plan to feel. Alessio's eyes darkened slightly. What do you feel? Grace's breath caught. She forced herself to stay steady. Attracted, safe sometimes. Confused, angry at myself for being attracted after what happened. Alessio didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He let her speak. Grace continued, voice quieter. And I feel wanted, in a way that's hard to ignore. Alessio's throat moved as he swallowed. You are wanted. Grace's eyes flicked to his mouth for half a second, and she hated that her body reacted before her mind could stop it. Alessio leaned forward slightly, not closing the distance too fast. Grace, I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. Grace held his gaze, heartbeat loud. What are you asking? I'm asking you to let me earn you, he said quietly. Not by taking. By choosing you every day, the way you choose yourself. Grace's eyes stung slightly, and it annoyed her. She wasn't a crier, not like that. You talk like you've had practice, she said, trying to lighten it. Alessio's mouth twitched. No, I talk like I'm terrified of losing you. Grace let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That's not charming, you know. It's honest, he replied. The band began playing a slower song. The sound filled the space around them, smoothing the edges of the conversation. Grace tried to return to normal topics, her favorite movies, his opinion on coffee, Ethan's annoying habits. They laughed. Alessio actually laughed, quiet and low, and it changed his entire face. At one point, Grace mentioned Ethan's dramatic suit man comment. Alessio's eyes narrowed. He told you? Grace smiled. Of course he did. Alessio shook his head once, almost amused. He enjoys suffering. Grace laughed, real and warm, and when she did, Alessio's gaze softened like he'd been waiting for that sound. After dinner, Alessio didn't touch her until they stood. He offered his hand, palm up, patient, not demanding. Grace stared at it. A week ago, that hand had been the hand of a man who thought control was his right. Now, it was the hand of a man asking permission. Grace placed her fingers in his. The contact was small. It felt huge. His hand was warm, steady. He didn't tighten his grip. He didn't pull her closer. He simply held her like he was honored she'd allowed it. They walked toward the exit slowly. Outside, the air was cool. The sidewalk was busy but not crowded. Grace turned to him. Thank you for not making tonight about you. Alessio's voice was low. It was about you. Grace's breath caught again, annoyed by her own reaction. They stood near her car. Grace unlocked it, then turned back. Alessio didn't move closer. He waited. Grace lifted her chin. "Are you going to kiss me?" Alessio's eyes darkened. His voice stayed careful. "Do you want me to?" Grace swallowed. Her heart hammered. She wasn't sure if she wanted the kiss or the proof that he would ask. "I do," she said softly, "but I want you to understand something first." Alessio's jaw flexed, listening. "If you ever scare me again," Grace said, voice calm but firm, "I will leave. No warnings, no dramatic speeches. I'll just be gone." Alessio nodded once. "I understand." Grace held his gaze. "Do you?" His voice dropped lower. "Yes, and I accept it." That answer should have made her feel powerful. Instead, it made her feel seen. Grace stepped closer. Alessio didn't move until she did. Then he lifted one hand and touched her cheek gently, as if testing reality. His thumb brushed lightly along her skin, slow and careful. Grace's breath caught. Her body leaned into the touch before she could stop it. Alessio's eyes searched hers. "Tell me if you want me to stop." Grace shook her head once. Then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't possessive. It was steady, warm, controlled in the best way, like he was holding himself back because her comfort mattered more than his hunger. Grace's hands rose to his shirt without thinking. She felt the heat of his body, the clean scent of his cologne, the solid presence of him. She kissed him back, slow and deliberate, letting herself feel the thing she'd been denying. When they separated, Grace's lips tingled. Her heart was racing. Alessio rested his forehead lightly against hers for a second, then pulled back before it became too much. His voice was low. "I've wanted to do that for months." Grace swallowed. "And you chose not to." "Yes," he said, "because I didn't want you to feel trapped." Grace's chest tightened. She stepped back slightly, trying to steady herself. "This doesn't mean I'm staying." Alessio nodded. "I know." Grace opened her car door, then paused, looking at him. Alessio waited. Grace hesitated, then said quietly, "I meant what I said. Tonight mattered." His expression softened. "Good." Grace slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and started the engine. Before she pulled away, she opened her bag to put her phone away. Her fingers brushed the offer letter again. She froze, because on top of the folder now, something she was sure hadn't been there before, was a small folded note. Not printed, handwritten. Grace's stomach tightened as she opened it. It was in Alessio's handwriting, clean, firm, controlled. "I didn't touch your bag. I asked the hostess to place this inside your coat pocket earlier before you wore it, so you'd know I can want you, without crossing a line." Grace stared at the note, heart pounding. Then she flipped it over. A second line, smaller. "But I'm still afraid, because tomorrow you might tell me you're leaving." Grace's throat tightened. She looked up through the windshield. Alessio was still standing on the sidewalk watching her, not like a hunter, not like an owner, like a man waiting for an answer he didn't deserve to demand. Grace's fingers tightened around the note, because she realized, in that moment, that her decision wasn't just about a job. It was about whether she believed a powerful man could truly change, and whether she was brave enough to let him try. She put the car in gear, and her phone buzzed on the seat beside her. A new email notification. Subject line: "Confirmation required. Offer expires tomorrow at 9 a.m. Grace's breath caught, eyes fixed on the screen. Tomorrow morning. A deadline. A choice. And she hadn't told Alessio the most important part yet. Grace's phone buzzed again. "Confirmation required. Offer expires tomorrow at 9 a.m. Her stomach dropped like she'd missed a step on a dark staircase. Tomorrow morning. A deadline that didn't care about kisses, handwritten notes, or the way Alessio Romano had looked at her on the sidewalk like he was trying not to breathe too loudly. Grace sat in her car with the engine running, fingers tight around the steering wheel, staring at the email like it might change if she blinked hard enough. She didn't want to be dramatic. She also didn't want to be trapped. By a job, by a man, by her own feelings. She drove home anyway because leaving the parking lot felt easier than deciding. Alessio stood outside the jazz bar long after her taillights disappeared. He didn't follow. He didn't call. That restraint felt like holding a weight that burned his muscles, but he kept holding it. When he got home, his apartment was quiet in a way that used to feel like peace. Tonight it felt like a test. He didn't pour a drink. He didn't turn on the TV. He sat at his kitchen island, phone in his hand, and stared at her name without touching it. Grace Carter. He wanted to send one message. I can fix this. He deleted it. He wanted to send another. Tell me what you need. He paused on that one longer. Then he put the phone down and forced himself to do the hardest thing he'd done in years. Wait. Grace didn't sleep much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the email subject line. She felt the warmth of Alessio's hand on her cheek. She heard her own voice promising she'd leave if he scared her again. By 2 a.m, she got up, made tea, and sat on the couch with her laptop open. The offer was real, clean, safe, a different world. She read the details twice, then a third time, as if repetition would make the choice easier. Her phone buzzed. Ethan, she answered, voice tired. It's late. I know, Ethan said softly, but I had a feeling you weren't sleeping. Grace stared at the offer letter on her screen. The offer expires tomorrow at 9. Ethan went quiet. That's fast. Mm-hmm. And you like him, Ethan said, not as a question. Grace closed her eyes. Don't. Okay, Ethan replied. Then let me say this instead. Your life doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing movie. Grace opened her eyes. It feels like it. It doesn't, Ethan insisted. You can leave the job and still see him. If he's real, he'll respect that. Grace swallowed. And if he doesn't, then you'll know, Ethan said. And you'll walk away, clean. Grace's throat tightened. He kissed me. Ethan made a small sound. Of course he did. Grace almost laughed. It wasn't reckless. That's good, Ethan said gently. Listen, whatever you choose tomorrow, choose it because it's right for you, not because you're afraid of losing him. Grace's voice dropped. What if I lose him anyway? Ethan's tone softened even more. If he's worth keeping, he won't ask you to risk your peace to prove you care. Grace sat very still after they hung up, because that sentence felt like a compass. The next morning, the office looked the same. Grace didn't. Her hair was pinned back tighter than usual. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharper, like she'd made herself into a wall so her feelings couldn't leak through. Alessio noticed immediately. He didn't comment on it. He watched her walk to her desk, place her bag down, open her tablet, and begin her day like she wasn't holding a deadline inside her chest. He stepped out of his office a few minutes later, moving slowly, careful not to startle her. Good morning, he said. Grace looked up. Good morning. A beat. Alessio kept his voice steady. How did you sleep? Grace blinked, surprised by the softness. Not great. Alessio nodded once as if he'd expected that. Come in for a minute. Grace hesitated, then stood. Okay. Inside his office, the door stayed open. Alessio didn't go behind his desk. He stayed near the window again, giving her space, like he'd learned she breathed better when she had room. Grace sat across from him, posture controlled. What's this about? Alessio studied her face. Tell me what you're carrying. Grace's jaw tightened. That's a personal question. I know, he said quietly. So you can tell me no. Grace held his gaze for a long moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out her laptop. She turned it so he could see. The email was still open. Alessio read the subject line. He didn't flinch. He didn't harden. But his eyes changed, like something deep inside him had taken a slow hit. How long do you have? He asked. Until 9, Grace said. Alessio glanced at the clock. 8:12. Less than an hour. Grace watched him closely, braced for the wrong reaction. Pressure, bargaining, control. Alessio surprised her. He exhaled slowly and nodded once. You should take it. Grace went still. What? Alessio's voice stayed calm. If it's better for you, you should take it. Grace stared, disbelief rising. You don't even know the details. I know enough, he replied. It's a clean offer, a clean exit, and you deserve choices that don't come with fear. Grace's throat tightened. So you're just letting me go? Alessio's jaw flexed, and for a second she saw the emotion he was holding back, something raw and inconvenient. I'm not letting you go, he said carefully. I'm not holding you. Grace's fingers tightened around the edge of her laptop. That sounds like the same thing. It isn't, he said. One is control, the other is respect. Grace's heartbeat grew louder. And what about us? Alessio's gaze held hers. If you want there to be an us, it won't be built on your dependence on my world. Grace swallowed. So what are you saying? Alessio took one slow step closer, still keeping distance, still not crowding her. I'm saying leave the job if you want to leave. And if you still want to see me after that, I'll earn you without a contract between us. Grace's breath caught, eyes burning slightly. You make it sound easy. It's not, he admitted, voice low. I want to tell you to stay. I want to tell you I'll fix everything if you just don't go. Grace watched him. But you're not saying that. No, Alessio said, because that would be about me, not you. Grace's chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. She looked down at the laptop again. 8:17. Grace forced her voice steady. If I accept it, I'll be gone soon. Alessio nodded. Then I'll miss you. The simplicity of that sentence, no bargaining, no threats, hit her harder than anything else he could have said. Grace blinked quickly. I didn't expect you to say this. I didn't expect to be the kind of man who could, he replied. Grace's lips parted, but no words came out. Alessio didn't push. He stepped back to give her space again. You have time. Use it. Grace lifted her chin, struggling to keep her composure. You're not going to watch me decide. Alessio's mouth tightened faintly. No. I'm going to leave you alone with your choice. He moved toward the door. Grace's voice stopped him. Alessio. He turned. Grace swallowed. Thank you. Something softened in his expression, almost painful. Whatever you choose, I'm proud of you. Then he left the office. And he didn't look back. Grace sat there for a long moment, alone, staring at the screen. No pressure, no manipulation, no extra calls, just space. She walked back to her desk slowly like she was carrying glass. She sat down, opened the email, hovered her cursor over the button. Her hands trembled. Ethan's voice echoed in her head. If he's worth keeping, he won't ask you to risk your peace to prove you care. Alessio hadn't asked. He'd done the opposite. Grace took a breath and clicked. Accept offer. A confirmation page loaded. Her chest tightened, but not with regret, with fear of what came next. Because now the job was a closing door, and she still wanted him. Her phone buzzed immediately, an automated response thanking her, outlining next steps, relocation call later today. Grace stared at it, then slowly locked her phone and sat back. She felt like she'd jumped without knowing if there was water below. Later that morning, Alessio walked past her desk like nothing had happened, but his eyes met hers briefly. Grace expected pain, anger, something. Instead, she saw pride and something else beneath it. Relief, as if her choice had proven something he needed to believe, that she wouldn't stay because she was trapped. Grace's throat tightened. She stood abruptly and followed him into the hallway. Alessio, she said, voice low. He stopped and turned, waiting. Grace took a breath. I accepted it. Alessio's face didn't change, but his eyes did. Dark, intense, full of feeling he refused to weaponize. He nodded once. Okay. Grace's chest tightened. That's all you have to say? Alessio's jaw flexed. If I say more, it will sound like I'm trying to change your mind. Grace stared at him, frustrated and overwhelmed. I'm not leaving because I hate you. Alessio's breath hitched faintly. I know. Grace's voice shook slightly. I'm leaving because I'm scared. Alessio's gaze held hers. Of me? Grace hesitated. Then she shook her head. Of what I feel when I'm near you. That honesty hung between them like a spark. Alessio took one slow step closer, still not touching her, still careful. Grace. She lifted her chin. If I'm not your employee anymore, what are we? Alessio's voice dropped low. Whatever you want us to be. Grace's heart hammered. I want you. Alessio went still. Grace swallowed, forcing the words out before she could take them back. But I want you without fear, without control, without your world swallowing mine. Alessio's throat moved as he swallowed hard. Then that's what you'll get. Grace searched his face. How do I know? Alessio's eyes didn't waver. Because you just did the hardest thing. You chose your freedom. Now you can choose me, or not, from a clean place. Grace's eyes stung and she hated it. Alessio's voice softened. Come with me tonight. Grace's pulse spiked. Where? Not my penthouse, he said immediately, like he knew what she'd fear. A place that doesn't belong to me. Grace's breath caught. Why? Because I want to prove something, he said quietly. That I can be close to you without owning the ground you stand on. Grace stared at him. Then she nodded once. Slow. Okay. Alessio's expression shifted. Relief and hunger held tightly behind control. I'll pick you up. Grace's brows lifted. No. Alessio paused. No. Grace's voice steadied. I'll meet you. My car. My choice. For a second, Alessio looked almost amused. Then he nodded. Yes, your choice. Grace exhaled, feeling the tension loosen a fraction. Text me the address. I will, he said, then hesitated. And Grace? She looked up. Alessio's voice was quiet. I'm proud of you. Grace's throat tightened again. Stop saying that. I can't, he murmured. It's true. Grace turned away before her face betrayed her. That afternoon, the office buzzed with routine, but Grace felt like she was floating inside it. She handled calls, organized schedules, answered emails. But beneath all of it, she felt the countdown. Not to 9 in the morning, to tonight. Because tonight wasn't dinner. Tonight was the first moment they would meet without the job between them. A clean line, a new beginning, and that scared her more than anything. At 5, Grace's phone buzzed with a text from Alessio. Guys, PM, Riverside Gallery. There's a small exhibit and a quiet cafe next door. No private rooms, no security, just you and me. Grace stared at the message. A gallery, public, calm, neutral ground. Her chest tightened, not with fear, with anticipation. She typed back, I'll be there. Then, before she could overthink, she added, and Alessio, don't be late. His reply came almost instantly. Never. Grace set the phone down and breathed out slowly, because tonight would show her the truth, whether he could love her the way he promised, or whether the moment he felt her slipping free, the old Alessio would come roaring back, and she didn't know which possibility scared her more. Grace arrived at the Riverside Gallery 5 minutes early. She parked in a well-lit spot, locked her car, and stood for a second with her hand on the strap of her purse, steadying her breath, steadying her thoughts. The building glowed warm through tall windows, people moving inside like silhouettes in honey light. No velvet ropes, no bodyguards, no feeling of being watched, just normal. She stepped in and let the quiet swallow her. Soft music, low voices, the scent of clean air and fresh paint. She walked slowly, eyes scanning the room, and then she saw him. Alessio Romano stood near a wall of black and white photographs, hands in his pockets, sleeves rolled up, dark shirt open at the collar. He looked out of place and somehow perfectly right, like danger dressed in patience. When his eyes found her, his face shifted. Not a smile, not a performance. Something gentler, something almost relieved. You came, he said as she approached. Grace lifted her chin. I said I would. Alessio nodded once, like he respected that more than any promise. Thank you. They didn't touch. They didn't rush. They walked side by side through the exhibit, pausing at images that made Grace tilt her head, made Alessio quietly ask what she saw. It wasn't small talk. It was learning. How she thought, how she felt, how her attention moved. At one photo, an old street, rain on pavement, Grace murmured, "This one feels lonely." Alessio looked at it, then at her. "That's what you were afraid of." "Not me." "Loneliness." Grace's throat tightened. "You're getting too good at reading me." "I'm trying," he said softly. "Not to control, to understand." They ended up in the cafe next door, a simple place with warm lamps and a few tables. Grace chose where they sat. Alessio let her. He didn't even glance around like he owned the room. Halfway through their coffee, Grace's phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Relocation call, tomorrow. Her chest tightened. Alessio noticed the change in her face. "Do you want to leave?" Grace looked up, surprised. "You'd let me walk out right now?" "Yes," he said calmly. "Because if you stay, I want it to be because you want to, not because you're managing my reaction." Grace stared at him for a long moment, then set her phone face down. "I accepted the offer," she said quietly, "and I'm still here." Alessio's eyes darkened, not with anger, something warmer. "That means more than you know." Grace swallowed. "Don't ruin it." "I won't," he promised, and his voice didn't sound like a man making empty vows. It sounded like a man choosing a life. When they walked back outside, the night was cool and clean. They stopped near her car. Grace's fingers tightened around her keys. Alessio didn't reach for her. He waited. Grace searched his face. "Tell me the truth. Are you going to try to pull me back into your world?" Alessio's jaw flexed. "I'm going to ask you to build a world with me. One that doesn't swallow you." Grace's heart kicked hard. He continued slower. "If you move, I'll visit. If you stay, I'll earn it. If you decide you don't want me, I'll survive it. I won't punish you for choosing yourself." Grace's eyes stung. "You're saying all the right things again." Alessio stepped closer, still careful. "Then don't listen to words. Watch what I do." Grace took a breath, then nodded toward her car. "Okay, watch this." She opened the door, reached into her bag, and pulled out the envelope she'd given him, the resignation notice copy she'd kept for herself, edges slightly bent. Alessio's gaze sharpened. "Grace!" She held it up between them. "This was my exit." Then she tore it in half. Clean, decisive. Alessio went still, like he didn't trust what he was seeing. Grace lifted her chin. "I'm not staying because I'm trapped. I'm staying because I want to." Alessio's breath hitched. His eyes flashed. Heat, relief, gratitude, desire, all held under control. Grace added, voice firm, "But I'm still taking the call tomorrow. I'm still keeping my options. And if you ever cross my line again, I know," he said quietly, "you'll be gone." Grace watched him. "And?" Alessio's voice dropped low. "And I'll deserve it." That answer cracked something open inside her. Grace stepped closer. Alessio didn't move until she did. Then he lifted his hand, paused a fraction, and waited. Silent permission. Grace leaned into him first. His hand slid to her waist, warm and steady, not pulling, just holding. When he kissed her, it was slow, deep, and careful, like he was still proving he could want her without taking. Grace's fingers gripped his shirt and she felt him smile against her mouth, a quiet, almost disbelieving thing. When they separated, her forehead rested briefly against his. Alessio's voice was rough. "Come home with me." Grace's pulse spiked. She pulled back just enough to see his eyes. "Your penthouse?" He shook his head. "Not tonight. Your place. Your rules." Grace blinked, caught off guard. Then she smiled, small, real. "Good answer." Alessio's mouth curved. "I'm learning." Grace opened her car door, then paused and looked back at him. "One more thing." "Yes?" he murmured. Grace's eyes narrowed with playful warning. If Ethan calls you dramatic again, don't fight him. Alessio let out a low laugh. I won't. Grace smiled wider. Because he'll win. Alessio's eyes softened. Probably. Grace slid into the driver's seat, then rolled the window down. Alessio leaned in slightly, not crossing the line, waiting. Grace reached out and hooked one finger lightly into the edge of his rolled sleeve, just enough to feel him there. Alessio, she said, voice quiet and certain. Don't lose control again. Alessio covered her hand with his, warm and steady. I won't. Not because I'm afraid of losing you. Grace lifted a brow. Then why? His gaze held hers, intense and calm. Because loving you feels better than controlling anything ever did. Grace's breath caught. Then she nodded once, like the decision had finally settled into her bones. Okay, she whispered. Then love me. Alessio's smile was slow and real. Always. As Grace drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Alessio stayed where he was, hands in his pockets, watching her go, not like a man guarding his possession, but like a man honoring her freedom. And for the first time, that look didn't scare her. It made her feel chosen,